This is the Art of Darkness podcast with Kevin Kautzman.
And Brad Kelly. We're a couple of very online writers interested in the dark side of what drives creative people to create against all odds.
This show is about art and the people who make it, what it costs them, and what it takes to bring something unique and impactful into the world.
Each episode, we excavate the life and work of an artist you might think you know.
Don't worry, they're all safely dead.
On every episode, we try and find out just what the hell was wrong with them and how they worked through their darkness to create something that lives on after them and continues to move culture.
Find us online at artofdarkpod.com and on Twitter at artofdarkpod. All right, we've got some sponsors for the pod now.
Wait, what?
Every link you need for the things we talk about here is at artofdarkpod.com/sponsors. First up, books.
If you're into this podcast, odds are you're probably a reader. We've got links to buy new books from bookshop.org and used books from alibris.com.
And if you want to listen to your books, we recommend and use audible.com.
It's great, and the catalog is huge.
All right. So if you're listening to this, you are online.
Maybe you're very online.
You probably have a website or are thinking of starting one. Maybe you want a website like artofdarkpod.com. We built that with WordPress, which is by far the most popular way to create websites. And the single best host for serious WordPress is WP Engine. I've personally used them for over a decade now, and I don't host my websites anywhere else. Go to artofdarkpod.com/sponsors and click on the WP Engine link to learn more.
Finally, the best way to support the show is at patreon.com/artofdarkpod. Get the bonus After Dark content for every episode, access to the book club, and more.
Thanks for supporting Art of Darkness. And I don't think that was too painful. I think we did a pretty good job there.
Yeah, that sounded good.
Yeah, we appreciate it. We're back. Art of Darkness, another Dark Room episode for you. For new listeners, people who don't know the show, the format of the show, Brad and I take turns doing core episodes. The core episodes are in-depth biographical profiles of dead artists. We each endeavor to do one a month, so 24 a year. And in order to keep the lights on, we get a lot of help from Patreon. And we really appreciate our Patreon subscribers. We've been having a banger month, a banger year. We're going for half a Crowley this year. So the 333 Patreon subscribers. We're over a third of the way there now. So please consider supporting the podcast. Patreon.com/artofdarkpod. Every episode you get the extra After Dark content. We do another 20 or 30 minutes. These dark rooms are devoted to discussions about one of the subjects we've covered. And today, our guest is Seth Michael May from the Obscuria Filmcast, which is a podcast I went on recently where they find films that have sort of slipped through the cracks and they discuss them. Seth, welcome to the pod. How are you?
I'm great, man. I'm great.
Yes.
Fun to be here.
Yeah, fun to have you here. And do you care to tell people? We're going to talk about Marilyn today, by the way. Marilyn Monroe is our subject. I have some very interesting stuff. We're going to go a little further into her love life, generally, but also on the After Dark. And we're specifically going to talk about the JFK connection a little more on the After Dark. On the main part of the dark room here, I think we're going to read Andrea Dworkin's crazy intro to my story in the full because it's just so far out. But before we get into it, Seth, let Art of Darkness listeners know who you are. And then also I want to hear a little more about Obscuria and how the idea came to you and what you do there.
Sure. I'm an actor and an acting coach. I make a lot of money coaching working actors and actors who want to stop just auditioning and get to more of a working actor place, or they've taken a break and now they want to come into it. And it's great. It feels wonderful. I can do it because of the pandemic from home a lot. I have a lot of international students, but through the late 80s and 90s, 2000s, I got to work with a lot of people who knew people, and some of them were actor studio members. So I got to meet people like Patricia Bosworth, who wrote Marlon Brando's autobiography, Jane Fonda's autobiography, wrote the article for Vanity Fair about Marilyn's pearl necklace that went back and forth and who owned it for a long time between her stepmother and her true daughter, and the mix-up of that. And my friend.
Well, you gotta tell us a little more about this
Oh,
pearl
yeah, we'll talk about
necklace.
that, definitely.
Yeah.
And Marty Frieda, who was one of my directors, taught Marilyn Monroe, or tried to, how to teach her how to drive a cab, because he was a cab. So I'll talk about that too.
Great.
Okay, cool. Very interesting.
Yeah, you've got the inside track on Marilyn from some people who knew
her. Yeah.
Cool.
Very cool. Wow, we love that. Yeah. Where else can you get that? You get a deep dive profile, and then we bring someone on who can maybe give you a little bit of the inside.
I like it.
Very cool. Well, and now tell us a little bit about your show. I had a great time coming on.
We did Dark Song with you, which we brought you in because I was like, where can we find someone who knows about this ritual, the Abermelon ritual, which sounds like a ritual using bologna and a melon, but it's actually a ritual that is an obscure ritual of the Golden Dawn Society that you have to complete in a year. And if you don't, bad things will befall you and your loved ones and your lodge. And this woman decides she wants to do it. At first, we think to call up and speak to a lover, but instead it's to call back her dead son. And then it gets even darker still. So her and her occultist will live for a year in a cabin in northern England together. And it's like a play. There's really no other characters. Seal it off with salt, and things start to happen. And it is a dark, little, quiet film.
It is
Hollywood.
It does. It's a very fine example of independent cinema at its finest. Driven by writing, driven by scenario, great cinematography. It does not feel like it was made on the budget that it was made on. And it's also, as far as I can tell, the finest example of someone laying down ceremonial magic, not with no metaphor here, like just showing the ritual. I'm sure it was stylized somewhat, but I haven't seen anything else like it. Yeah. A Dark Song.
Yeah.
Very cool.
How did you get turned on to that film, Seth?
I was on Clubhouse, and I was in a room, and it was like the dark films of paganism that you haven't seen room, and people were talking about the Devil's Hoof and Witch Hunter General, and,
cool.
The original. What's the one? What's the one that they remade with Nick Cage?
The Wicker Man. The Wicker Man.
Yeah.
I just rewatched The Wicker Man. That movie never gets less weird. It is an extremely weird film.
A cut of the original, they had to put that together from what they shot. So they were talking about that, and then one guy said, "Have you seen A Dark Ring?" And he started talking to me, and I said, "No," and it sounded fascinating. So I picked it up, and I was like, "This is bizarre, bizarre."
Cool.
So I really dug it.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to
really
check
worth.
that out here.
Yeah, Brad, you have to check out A Dark Song, no
Yeah.
question. I want to come back on the pod at some point and talk Skinamarink. I'm always down to talk about that movie. Is not even that obscure. I mean, I guess on balance it is, but it's been sort of this crazy breakout indie horror film that I need to rewatch. How did you conceive of this idea for this pod? What was the impulse behind it? It's a very good idea. It's very clean. Let's talk about obscure movies. I like it as a concept. Yeah.
Mhm.
We were walking around talking about when you're at a party and someone goes, "Have you ever seen Holy Mountain?"
Mhm.
Holy Mountain, man, I can deal with Holy Mountain, except the opening with the frogs, man, is a little bit much. That frog
Yeah.
is I gotta pass that part. What about El Topo? Oh no, I can't even watch El Topo. In fact, until I watched the documentary about what El Topo is about, I avoided El Topo completely. And the other person, yeah, I don't go near El Topo. And then you know what? There should be a place for obscure films, like just so you can watch them and get an idea, and then maybe there's a little sort of a narrow end of the pool to kind of into their work a little bit.
Sure.
I think the next level I want to go to is a podcast where I just take friends, the way that guy who does the Hot Wings podcast.
Oh yeah.
I've heard about that. Yeah.
That shows scenes from El Topo.
See if they can stomach them.
Just Jadorowsky scenes, like from Holy Mountain, El Topo, Santa Sangre, and he makes them watch it and like puts the camera on them and he watches them like trip.
Right.
I like it. El Nopo.
Yeah.
El Nopo.
El Nopo. El Nopo. Right. And where can people find your podcast? You're on YouTube.
We're on YouTube, and we have we get around to uploading them to Spotify and iTunes when we time. So eventually they will be everywhere, but right now they are on YouTube at Obscuria Filmcast, and there are a few of them getting uploaded to the other two.
Very cool.
Good.
Very cool. Yeah, we'll have links for that in the show notes for people who want to check that out. Highly recommended.
Yeah. All the show notes are always at artofdarkpod.com. Brad, when did we do the Marilyn episode? It wasn't that long ago. It was
like less
2-3 weeks ago.
I don't even think it was that. I think it was a week ago.
Oh, was it? I don't know. I lose.
No, you're right. It might have been.
It
was a little over a week ago.
Yeah.
But anyway, not long.
Having sat with the Marilyn episode a little bit, Brad, where are you at with Marilyn? Did it change your mind about her at all? Like where? Yeah.
I didn't have too many preconceived notions. I mean, I had the sense that there was more to her than the stereotype. She is one of those figures you sort of grow up with in a way. I mean, she's one of those, even to the extent of like showing up as a gag in, whatever,
The Simpsons or whatever.
Animaniacs or The Simpsons or whatever.
Yeah.
Right. So it's just kind of always there. So I didn't really have too much of an opinion about her. I always felt like she kind of got a raw deal in some way, but I never really knew the details of that. So it's really interesting to see her it much more three-dimensionally, Kevin, thanks to you doing the deep dive. And, there's an aspect of it that makes me think about how evil Hollywood can be, in particular of its treatment of certain types of people. And I'm very curious how much that has changed. In some ways, it probably hasn't changed at all.
All right. If anything, they sort of brought it to scale now with social media and people.
Right.
Like the first person to psyop you is yourself.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. A lot of these sort of Instagram booty selfie accounts are sort of Marilyn Monroeizing themselves, aren't they? Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so that's interesting. Just to kind of think about how she is a sort of almost a symbol for that whole thing. But now that I've heard that, I really see her much more as a human being, respect her, intelligence and talent and ability, and kind of notice there's a poetic element to the curse that she had almost. I almost think of it as a curse, this being cursed with this this attractiveness, this kind of attractiveness, this energy, this sex vibrations, as we called it in the episode, that she puts off, and how that was like her, that was her doom in a way. Like she was never going to be able to escape that, no matter what she did. I mean, she could have cured cancer, and she would have still had to deal with this, right? So
yeah, the only way that it would have worked for her was to age out of it, but.
Right.
And then who knows what that would have looked like. As an actor, Seth, what is your opinion of Marilyn? And then I have a few readings that I want to get into to further the conversation.
As an actor who doesn't age out of it,
yeah.
or
just what was she as an actor? Yeah.
Yeah.
I stood behind Julie Christie once. And I was like, she was still incredibly attractive to me. And the people, I'm standing behind Julie Christie. I texted on my phone and they were like, you're so lucky, man. And I'm like, you're so nice. And they were like, fuck you. Like they wanted her to be an unhappy person.
Right.
Because she was old Julie Christie.
Mm-hmm.
And then I find that, like, when I go on Paulina Korstakova's Instagram, and she'll say something about her body or her face and how she really comes from a place of, like, this is me at 57.
Mm-hmm.
And she's gorgeous.
Yeah.
Other 57-year-olds will attack her going, you don't reflect what a normal woman looks like at 57. Or other people are like, yeah, you go, girl.
Right.
They're attacked for saying, yeah, you go, girl.
Right.
Like she can't win.
No.
And I take it to the point of, you know what? It's just really hard being yourself, no matter where you are.
Mm-hmm.
So you might as well have a self-esteem. But isn't there something about just trying to be confident where you are in your life?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think Marilyn, this is a through line on this podcast where, for me, I often struggle with people who, from a distance, look like they have it all. How could you fumble the bag? Marilyn, go to treatment, get it together. Marlon, you know, Brando, you can't even sort of like save your own family. Just watching disaster pile up on people, even Burroughs, our first subject. And like, how do you end up in a scenario where you're in Mexico and you act? It's baffling. And he came from money and all the rest of it. You know, I think so many of us who are on the kind of treadmill of work and sustaining ourselves and supporting ourselves, you sort of don't imagine what the other side of that looks like.
Right.
Like Marilyn, there isn't an actress or an actor alive today who wouldn't exchange like a struggling one, wouldn't exchange for the shots she had and for the career that she had built. And yet it wasn't enough. She, to me, it is a case where it's pretty obvious that her childhood was so bad. And the contrast between we didn't coin this phrase. It was someone I think it was Elia Kazan, or it might have been, it was one of her acting coaches. It's on the episode.
Yeah.
Said, you know, were you trying to read that sexily? No.
Right.
And he just was like, I don't know how to work with you because it's like everything you do comes off this certain way. So, and of course, like you say, Brad, it's a curse. It cuts both ways. But the high contrast of her turning 12 or 13 or 14 or however old she was, and then suddenly being adored by just the local boys all the way up to the career she had and singing for the president, that only, well, one, let's just say only in America. That is she's pure distilled Americana from that period. It's almost impossible you can't imagine that happening in North Korea. For example, or Cuba or whatever. But I think that contrast must have been, there's no amount of coaching that could prepare you. It's like she got on a roller coaster and the only way she got off was the way she finally went out. Yeah.
I think too of like this thing that seems to happen, and I've watched this happen to multiple people. And I guess I'm curious if you guys think this is true in the Marilyn Monroe case too. You watch people sort of like, I suppose Britney Spears is an example, but there's not a number of others who they have this, meteoric rise to sort of the center of attention, of public attention, and then we sacrifice them. It feels like it's like we get them all the way up there, and then almost, not to get too sort of metaphorical about it, but from a zoomed out perspective, it seems like we literally sacrifice them for some reason. Why do we have to make it? Why can't somebody like, say, Britney Spears, and maybe she's a bad example because I honestly don't know what she's been up to the last few years, but
MK Ultra mind control, man. She's got the mouse in her head her entire life.
We seem to not be able to just kind of let them sort of go out to pasture peacefully, and everybody nods and says, wasn't that great? Didn't they have a great career? Oh, I'm so glad that they, instead it's like they have to be destroyed for some reason. Many such cases. What do you think about that? What do you think that's about, Seth? Why do we need to see I think about Amy Winehouse, for example, too.
I think it's about they get to an age, and if they're left to their own devices, they might start meditating on things they were told to do and talk about that.
Right.
And we don't want them talking about that, and they don't want them building on the pieces that they've previously done and making a satire of that.
All right, and because now they have power. And Marilyn apparently changed the industry. She had her own production company. And they're a threat because it's the institutions make you. Marilyn didn't make herself, and there was really no way that she could have. So they're going to get somebody
had to discover her, right? I mean, based from where she came from, someone had to discover her and put her on. I think there's something too to the resentment. I mean, you were referring to this, Seth, with the Julie Christie story. I think there is people also resent successful people who are at the center of attention, and there is an element of like the resentment eventually catches up to the positive attention, right? This is like there's a moment where Marilyn Monroe is undeniable, and then, or fill in the blank with whoever, and then at some point people are sort of like, well, why does she have all this? She's not so good looking, she's not so talented, and that all kind of catches up to them.
Slept her way to the top. You're describing the Art of Darkness group chat at t.me/artofdarkpod. They've started to get really bitter in there, really angry at Brad and my success with the pod.
But if you want it, made it when our fans,
when the mob turns on us, finally, gee whiz. I've got a reading from Eve Arnold. It's this photo book, just called Marilyn Monroe. I think this is a good segue from what you just said, Brad. The chapter I'm going to read from is called Launching Marilyn. I'll read a few paragraphs of this. It was not just her physical self that she tried to develop. She began to buy books and records to try to educate herself. We recall from the core episode, she realized one night she was out with a couple of her friends that she had nothing to talk about. She was like, she wasn't stupid. She was just uninformed. So she set out to change that. In 1952, when Philip Halsman came to Hollywood to photograph her, he reported that she had at least 200 books on her shelves, ranging from James Joyce's Ulysses to Tom Paine's Rights of Man. Interesting, right?
Yeah.
There were E.E. Cummings, Keats, and Shelley, books on religion, history, psychology, translations of French, German, and Russian classics. She kept Whitman's Leaves of Grass at her bedside, and she enrolled at UCLA to take evening classes in literature and art appreciation. She confused learning with intelligence and was pained all her life by her lack of formal education. She was unlettered, but learned quickly from people she met. This image of the dumb blonde bimbo is just completely inadequate. And I think most people know that, but it's good to have it reiterated. I'll just go on a little more here. Her curiosity was a void to be filled, and she ingested information and experience. She had an instinctive understanding of people that enabled some of us to come close, but she always withheld part of herself. Every book, every class, every new person from whom she could learn was a step up and out of the misery of her background. Her critics thought her reading a pose because during her starlet days, she would walk around with a book under her arm. When she married Arthur Miller, a wise guy said she had married her college education. She was ribbed unmercifully by the press when she told reporters that she wanted to play Grushenka in the projected film version of Dostoevsky's Brothers Karamazov. She had read the book and understood the part. The later revision of opinion about her filmic skills indicates that she could have made a marvelous Grushenka. The film was a dud. One more para quick. She took lessons in speech, singing, dancing, and acting, and she kept a picture of the great Eleonora Duse propped in a corner of her dresser mirror. Do we know who that is? Eleonora Duse? Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you who is that?
Eleanor Duse was
Duse.
she was the main rival of what's her name? The one that was related to the Terrys, who was a more showy actress. It'll come to me in a second. But there were two schools of acting, and all the method people were looking toward Duse, and all the English people were looking at help me here.
I'm looking
Brad's looking it up. Yeah. It looks like, well, you guys did.
Bernhardt?
George Shaw was looking at both of them and comparing both of them.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So yeah, the point of all this is that Marilyn was no slouch. In any case, Brad will read a little bit about Duse here in a second.
Sarah,
yeah, go ahead.
Sarah Bernhardt?
Bernhardt.
Yeah. Okay.
That was the rival to Eleanor Duse.
Yeah,
okay, interesting. Yeah. Yeah, Marilyn knew about Duse from her film magazine days. Garbo had been called the Duse of the screen, and Marilyn knew about Duse's film. She explained that the mistake Duse alluded to was to treat the screen as though it were a stage where gestures have to be wide, facial expressions broad, and projection intensified in order to reach the last rows in the upper galleries of the theater, whereas in films, exactly the opposite is required. She worked at her craft, but spent thought and time trying to promote herself. Often she was vague and seemed to drift, but she never lost sight of her goal. Finally, she wrangled the screen test. Leon Shamroy, the cinematographer who tested her, was knocked out. His reaction: I got a cold chill. This girl had something I hadn't seen since silent pictures. She had a kind of fantastic beauty like Gloria Swanson, and she radiated sex like Jean Harlow. There it is again. Mm-hmm. She didn't need a soundtrack to tell her story. So, there it is again, though.
Yeah.
Radiating Marilyn Monroe.
Right. She's got some like she's bewitching
Mm.
people. Yeah, yeah. I mean, I keep using almost like a occult terminology for her, but I guess that's my vocabulary for this sort of thing. Yeah, she's captivates people. She bewitches them. Yeah, interesting.
just magnetism. And I'm looking up Eleonora Duse here. This is good. Let's read a little bit of this from the Wikipedia. She was born in 1858. She was often simply known as Duse. She was an Italian actress rated by many as the greatest of her time. She performed in many countries, notably in the plays of Annunzio and Ibsen. Goes on, Duse achieved a unique power of conviction and verity on the stage through intense absorption in the character, eliminating the self, as she put it, and letting the qualities emerge from within, not imposed through artifice. So, and you're saying that in the history of acting, Seth, that the method people were looking at her as an inspiration?
Yeah, she was like high up there as someone to like strive for.
Yeah, and then we see this sort of translation, which is a fascinating period, the translation into film. Before it's fully understood to be a separate art form, when it's theater with a camera pointed at it at first, and the development of the techniques, both acting and camera work and blocking and everything, that was still on its way. I mean, Duse died in 1924. Are we even out of the silent era at that point? I don't think. Close.
When did the film silent era end? I have a point to make about it. Yeah, it gradually transitioned to talkies. I love it. We're going to the talkies. That must have been mind-blowing. That happened in between 1926 and 1930. That must have blown their minds. I love thinking about what that must have been like to go and see a talkie for the first time. Babylon, that movie, which is kind of middling and uneven, but it does sort of talk about that period. The movie to watch, I would say, if you want a case study in the method and the transformation in acting that happened. Well, one, go back and listen to our episode about Marlon Brando, because I say it on that episode too. But I found myself, I have a little quiver full of Art of Darkness anecdotes that come up over and over again when I meet different people. And the thing I tell them about Brando and film history is to watch The Men, because to my mind, that's the movie that do you know that one, Seth? Yeah. That's the one that's the film he made before, after Streetcar happened. He's a big star. He's going to be a big star. He's already a big Broadway star. Now they're going to take and do Streetcar as a film, the great film, and arguably the greatest stage to screen adaptation, certainly top 5, I would say. And he made this movie, The Men, and it is wild to watch the actors playing against Marlon, because they play in the old style that Brad was kind of describing. They all have these like mid-Atlantic accents. I don't believe a single frame when they're on screen. You just go, but and then Marlon shows up and he's just iridescent, and you can tell he's doing the thing that he does, and it's going to change everything, because when they're on screen with him, he mogs them all with his, I guess the word is verity, with the seeming authenticity of his performance. And then there'll be scenes where the other actors are playing against each other, and you go, oh, now I believe it, because they're both kind of doing this old-timey way of acting.
Right.
It's just such an interesting film for that reason. Seth, I see you smiling here.
Yeah.
Cosign.
It's a fabulous film, and like there are guys in there who went on to like form their own studios. Like Michael Howard is one of the guys in there, and he like really lived like a method guy. They like all stayed in the hospital with each other. There's a story in Brando's book that some preacher came in and it was like, if you believe in me, you'll all walk again. And some of those guys actually had no legs.
Oh my
and
God.
They're like moaning, and then shit for shits and giggles, Brando was like, I think I feel something. I think I feel. And he got up and walked.
That's a great anecdote. I don't know how I
Yeah.
missed that in my Brando coverage.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
great.
Seth, we've got to get some anecdotes about Marilyn going. Do
Yeah.
you have one? Yeah, share one with us, and then I'll get into the crazy introduction to this volume of my story that I have.
So, Patricia Bosworth told me this story at Marty Fried's funeral. Marty Fried wanted to be a member of the Actors Studio, and he drove a cab. He had been a dancer at those clubs in the Catskills, and he was like, I can't do this anymore. I can't be one of those guys in the Catskills, and if girls need partners, I'm here. And I guess that was one of the ways he also got women for the week. He was always available, and he taught these girls how to dance. And he said to his friend, I can't take it. I'm going to become a cab driver. And he became a cab driver. And in his time being a cab driver, he located where Lee Strasberg's house was. And he parked it on Tuesdays, and he parked it on Fridays. And he did it for a year. And after a year, he got up the gumption to go, I'm in front of your house every Tuesday and Friday. And I'm in front of the studio every Tuesday and Friday. And Lee was like, mm-hmm. And he's like, well, it's because I want to become an actor and a director. And that's why I do it. And Lee was like, well, then you should come inside.
Right.
Right.
He became Marty's personal chauffeur. So about a week later, Patricia Bosworth was let into the studio as a member. And there was a party, and she went to her first Actors Studio party. And Harry Belafonte was there, Marilyn Monroe was there, Jane Fonda was there. And it was time for the party to end, and she was standing next to her teacher she'd known for a week, Lee Strasberg. He said, you have a ride home? And she said, no. And he goes, I'll get you a ride home. And he hailed the cab, and there was Marty. And Marty drove up, and in the car was Marilyn Monroe.
Wow.
And then there was Harry Belafonte. And then there was Jane Fonda, and then she and Lee got into the car. And somehow in this back of the car, Marty said to Patty, so you seen anyone yet? And she goes, no. He goes, I'll take you out for a date. And she's like, oh, dating Marty Fried, is his assistant stage manager. And then about a block from that date being set up, Marilyn Monroe said, oh, I would love to have learned to drive the car. And Marty goes, I can teach you. And she goes, okay. So a week goes by. Patty never gets a phone call from Marty for a date. Another week goes by. No date, no call from Marty. Another week goes by. Patty's had it. She confronts Marty at the Actors Studio. She's like, Marty, I thought that we were dating. He goes, I am trying to teach Marilyn Monroe how to drive a car. I'm very busy right now. Okay.
Oh,
why don't we just be friends then, Marty?
Yeah.
That's
That's hilarious.
very,
It's a
story went. But
very fun.
She said Marilyn was too nervous, and he never was able to teach her.
Wow. Full-time job trying to teach her how to drive.
Now,
Interesting.
in terms of Marilyn, had a thing where if she had something and you liked it, she was like an Arab sheik about it. And the Strasbergs had a thing of if someone was more famous than they were, they couldn't stop them from giving it to you. So on one hand, John Strasberg once, his parents didn't drink. And T.S. Eliot came over and said, someone going to have a drink with me? And
this place is a wasteland. I need a drink.
And no one goes, well, Johnny, have a drink with me. And he proceeds to take out these tall glasses and make one heavy liquor, two heavy liquors, three, until he makes these cordials of big, like peppermint sticks, basically, of different heavy, like.
Oh,
Yeah.
jeez.
John Strasberg said they were too beautiful to drink, and he got wasted on them. And
Sure.
that
Yeah,
but then
wastelanded.
Yeah.
Oh no, we lost him.
Oh,
That's
Oh,
okay. He'll come
okay.
back.
All
We
right.
can vamp for a second. Well, these are fun. I'm really
Yeah,
enjoying
yeah.
these
No, these
stories.
are good. These are the stories that don't get written, kind of stories that don't get written down anywhere, right?
You're right,
Yeah,
right.
yeah, I
Yeah,
love it.
I imagine having to teach Marilyn how to drive, and I'm sure it would have been a stick
Oh,
and
yeah,
like
yeah.
somewhere in Manhattan or maybe
Right,
Yonkers.
right.
And,
You know, one of these big
yeah.
old boat cars for sure. Yeah,
How am I
yeah.
doing? Yeah,
You're doing
right.
fine, honey.
You're
Just
doing
clearing
great.
off rear view mirrors. Yeah.
Right. And then every guy rubbernecking and
Oh yeah, yeah,
oh, look at that. Who's that? Because she was
yeah,
quite famous at that point as
yeah.
well,
Sure.
already. I think by the
Yeah.
time she arrived at the actors.
I saw a dame driving that Chevrolet. I swear it was
I saw
Marilyn
an
Monroe. Yeah.
absolute dime piece driving that Chevy down Dykeman, Larry. I think we're going to get priced out here soon. This is crazy. Brad,
Hey,
will I read?
let me plug the Borges quick. Borges
Yeah, plug the
bookends,
Borges bookends.
April 16th, 4 p.m. Oh shoot, 4 p.m. Eastern time, I believe. We are meeting. We're talking about Borges Ficciones, which it brings together really two short story collections, Garden of Forking Paths and Artifices. If you haven't read it yet, it's 120 pages. There's a link to a free PDF on the Patreon post. Come join us. It is a hoot. Patreon.com/artofdarkpod.
Totally. And with Bookends, the book club, you choose your level of involvement. If you become a patron at patreon.com/artofdarkpod, you get access to the live Zoom meeting where we hang out, we talk about these various books, and we also record it. So if you're like, I don't have time, or you're on the other side of the world, maybe you're in Australia or New Zealand, you can't make it, we record it all. And I'm just going to say, well, here's the remainder of the episode. We're going to see if we can get Seth back. Hopefully he's all right and he didn't.
Yeah.
Right. I don't know. Maybe his Abermelin ritual went poorly. Who knows?
Could be.
Yeah. Hopefully, yeah. But I'll text him here and see where he's at. I've got two pieces. I've got for the After Dark for Patreon, something from Glamour and something from Irish Central. About JFK and Marilyn. So I'll read a little bit of that as a tease. But before I do, I'm just going to double down on the Patreon business. We know we have listeners. We know you're out there. We put in a great deal of work on this podcast. I'm preparing to do my Lenny Riefenstahl core episode. Brad, who are you preparing?
Andrei Tarkovsky.
Yeah. We do 24 of these a year-ish. Mm-hmm. We do all of these Darkroom episodes. We try to make it worth it for you, to you if you join the Patreon, but please legitimately consider supporting the podcast. Brad and I love doing this. We want to do this for a very, very long time. The thing that makes it possible for two grown men to devote as much time as we do to this podcast, to bring you guests, to do these core episodes that are well researched with material that we buy these books, we scour the internet. The thing that gives us the oomph to continue doing it, frankly, is the monetary support from Patreon. It is above everything else. What it tells us is what we're doing is valuable to you. We genuinely appreciate it. We love seeing the numbers go up, seeing the listener numbers go up. But in the long term, we're going to need a bigger boat.
Yep, for sure.
And yep.
Yeah. And in addition to that, rate, retweet, send to friends, things like that helps a lot as well. So
it really does. Give us 5 stars. Tell 5 people about Art of Darkness. Say, hey, at this point, you can go to the website. You can isolate the core episodes. You just go to the sidebar. You find the core episodes toggle category. At this point, there is something for everybody. You into tarot? Pamela Coleman Smith. Are you into
old Hollywood? We got Marilyn Monroe, Marlon Brando.
Country music, blues, film, television. Rod Serling. Are you into butt stuff? Crowley. Did I said the quiet part out loud? We did a 6 hour. We did a 6 hour episode about Aleister Crowley that was a sort of landmark episode with the great Stephanie Leahy, who is on to Cambridge. I mean, that's the kind of guest, that's the kind of person we bring on. We got Adam Lehrer coming up. The great Astral is coming on the pod. I want to do this for a very long time. Please support the pod in any way that you can. And here comes our friend Seth. He's back. He's back.
I don't know what happened.
No,
that's all right.
It's all right. We speculated that your Abramelin ritual.
My Abramelin ritual got me.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I was loving those stories. That was quite a lot of fun.
No, there was something up early on in the episode. I heard something about a pearl necklace.
Okay. Yes.
What's this? Yeah.
Okay, but before the pearl necklace, there was this one time John Strasberg is old enough to drive a car. And his parents are like, you don't need a car. You live in Manhattan.
Right.
Have Marty drive you everywhere. And he's sort of upset, and they're in the car going to Arthur Miller's, and Marilyn can sense, something's up. She goes, "Oh, Johnny, what's the matter?" And he goes, "Mom and Dad won't let me have a car." And he goes, "Oh, the studio just bought me an old car for one of the movies I did, and it's just under a sheet. Nobody drives it. You can have it." And it's like this antique Studebaker. So she just gave it to him. It's like this 1955 Studebaker that he was in mint condition, that she just gave it to him. That he
she didn't know how to drive. What was she going to do with it?
So he was like, they were like, looked at, and I can't argue with it. So it was hit for the rest of his life. And there was things like that. Okay, so the thing about the pearl necklace, which I thought was especially great for me, is so the Emperor of Japan had a son who didn't want to be the Emperor of Japan. He wanted to be a marine biologist, and he gifted to the countries in the UN these giant, monstrous, long-legged red crabs, the kind that you get at like Red Lobster, those giant crab legs.
Kind of hungry.
And when I went to the Brooklyn Aquarium, my grandfather said, "Oh, see those? Those are from the son of the Emperor of Japan. He didn't want to be the Japanese emperor. This is a gift from Hirohito Jr." And I was like, "Oh, okay, cool." Well, the other thing about him is he had a crush on Marilyn Monroe. So he handpicked the finest pearl-dived pearls for her. And he made a necklace for her, which he gave as a gift to her.
Whoa.
Which would seem like a really big deal, but it's Marilyn Monroe. So to her, it's just, hey, another necklace.
Right.
So she gave it as a gift to Susan Strasberg. Susan Strasberg took it and kept it, which wouldn't be a big deal, except that Lee's second wife was given the rights to everything in the Strasberg estate, except those pearls. So really? technically they were hers.
Yeah.
But they had been given physically.
Right.
And if you read the Patricia Bosworth article, which is online, there was right down to Susan Strasberg's last breath, because she had breast cancer and she was addicted to like faith healers and energy healers and acupuncturists and everything like that. She had a horrible, right to her last moment, she was signing them over to her lawyer to get the cash to give it to her grandchild. So her sister, who runs the Strasberg Institute, her stepmother could not get the money.
Wow.
Yeah. Like,
wow.
It's insane. It's insane. It's like something.
I have the story. It's from
That's
Vanity
wonderful.
Fair.
I sent it to you, right?
Yeah.
Why don't I read a bit of it?
Yeah,
I'm really
read a bit.
enjoying.
Yeah.
Very, very wild kind of. This is like a legendary object plus 8 to your charisma. If you
That's what I was gonna say. It's like you're bringing
like something from a
hand-picked pearls from the bottom of the sea, brought to you by the emperor who would be the emperor of Japan. Like that is it's like a fairy tale.
I love that this is like the biggest problem that like the greatest generation and the boomers had. Who inherits the emperor's pearls? Here I'm gonna read. This is from Vanity Fair. Paula let Marilyn know that she coveted her pearl necklace. "Oh, Marilyn," she'd gush, "I just love looking at those pearls." Marilyn would smile and caress the pearls, not telling Paula that she really wanted to give them away, since they reminded her of her disastrous marriage to Joe DiMaggio. All he did was watch TV night and day, she told Sidney Skulski. On Christmas Eve of 1957, Marilyn sent the pearls to Paula in a brown paper bag. They were left outside the Strasbergs' apartment door with a hand-scrawled note that read, "For Paula, from Marilyn." John Patrick remembers that Paula ran around the living room waving the pearls, her eyes full of tears. "Look at what she gave me. She knows how much I love those pearls." She wore them everywhere. Nothing had ever pleased her more. Marilyn was very generous to all the Strasbergs that Christmas. She gave Susan a Chagall sketch and bought Lee expensive art books and records. Later, she gave Johnny her Thunderbird convertible for his 18th birthday. "She knew I was being ignored by everybody," he says. "She knew what that present meant to me, everything." And then it goes on about Arthur Miller and this pearl necklace. And let me see if there's anything else about the pearls. Oh man, I looked up the word pearl in this article, and it's a lot of them. Yeah, no, I think that's it. I think our friend Seth here kind of told us that story.
Nice.
That's a fun one, man. That's like that's like a treasured object.
Right.
Yeah,
no, there's like a fable there. It's like a half. 3/4 of the way written fable is going on in that story.
Yeah.
It's great.
Seth, if you have any more anecdotes, hold on to them for a second. I'm just going to read the. Go ahead. Oh yeah, great. I'm just going to read the beginning of Andrea Dworkin's insane introduction to my story.
Can we say who Andrea Dworkin is for folks? Or I can look. I can.
Yeah,
I kind of am familiar with her, but let me give you
it's like like a second wave feminist. I think she came to Minnesota at one point on like a fellowship or to teach, and like tried to get a civic ordinance passed in Minneapolis to have pornography banned. So
that sounds right. Yeah.
Tell us who this was.
An American radical feminist writer and activist best known for her analysis of pornography. Her feminist writing, beginning in 1974, spanned 30 years. They are found in a dozen solo works, 9 books of nonfiction, 2 novels, and a collection of short stories. Or another 3 volumes were co-written or co-edited with U.S. constitutional law professor Catherine McKinnon. So yeah, she's written a number. She wrote a number of books. She was a prominent voice in the feminist movement during her time in the 70s. This is not my opinion. I think generally the opinion would be she is about as radical as they came in her day of a feminist. Trying to get pornography banned and a number of other things.
Right. I will not read her entire introduction because it goes on for some pages, but this is how it starts, and then I'll read her bit about when she sang to the president, Marilyn. "Let me first say to the male chauvinists who have written about Marilyn Monroe, Norman Mailer and James Wolcott come to mind, that fucking Jack Kennedy, Robert Kennedy, Arthur Miller, even Mr. DiMaggio, as she first called him, was rubbing salt in open suppurative wounds, hers. This memoir, the authorship of which is in some dispute, tells the childhood story of the world's loneliest orphan. Compared to this little girl, all the suffering children of literature had it pretty good. Dickens couldn't have imagined this strong, resourceful, ignorant, pitiful child. And it's unlikely that the men she knew, or those millions more who wanted to know her, ever gave her real life a thought. You can't imagine your mama selling you into menial labor for $5 a week, and that being your first memory. or that you didn't even know that the woman who visited now and then to deliver the $5 was your mama. The child was named Norma Jean. Later, a movie studio would give her Marilyn, but she would take her mother's surname, Monroe. This is quite astonishing since she was 7 before a foster parent told her that the visitor with the $5 was her mother. She was a pretty woman who never smiled. I'd seen her often before, but I hadn't known quite who she was. A visit to her mother's room was the first happy day in my life that I remember. Another first happy day occurred sometime after. For those who are poor in happiness, each time is a first time. Happiness never becomes a habit. And it goes on like this. I just think, what a heck of a way to start.
Yeah, right.
She like she comes out guns blazing. I'll go on a little more. She entered the demi-monde of modeling for the same reasons girls do now. She was essentially homeless as a child. She was sexually abused as a child. And people go into modeling because they're sexually abused. Okay. And I'm trying to follow your logic. This is this is a hammer looking for nails. And the man who abused her, a tenant in a foster home where she was doing menial work, the only escape from the orphanage, tried to give her a nickel to keep her quiet. Sex and barter, the act, and then the coin of the realm. It just goes on. I mean, just holy moly, lady. And then a little bit about the Kennedy happy birthday. I remember Monroe singing happy birthday to President Kennedy. I was a teenager. I was distressingly aware of a dirty joke I wasn't being let in on. She was the dirty joke. And in those days, boys, including presidents, would be boys. She was as alone on that stage as she ever was in the orphanage or foster home of the week. She kept trying to hold on for dear life with a man, some man who had his feet solidly planted in achievement. Instead, they had their feet solidly planted on her neck or other exposed flesh. As she aged, coming into a more mature talent, especially as a comic actor, she had as many as 20 abortions, and that's totally unfounded rumor. I don't know how true any of that is. And a host of so-called lovers. This memoir ends with her marriage to Joe DiMaggio, who subsequently beat her. She escaped a year later. That makes her the champ. Her survival instincts were so deeply and implicitly feminist that she knew Mr. Kimmel had no right to molest her when she was a child, and that Mr. DiMaggio had no right to beat her as an adult. Okay, I'll co-sign that.
Yeah.
It's like it does have a bit of a like old man yells at clouds quality, this introduction. She kept trading up finally to the brilliant Arthur Miller and the charming glib president of the United States. It didn't work as a strategy for survival. It never does. I mean, that intro is one of the most sort of from left field. Yeah, it's just so like such an unusual pick to have her write that intro.
Yeah, it's not an unusual pick for an article like that to exist, but to put that as the intro to this person's memoir is it's pretty intense. The thing I kind of trying to nail down what I don't like about it, I feel like she's not giving Marilyn any agency either. But from like the other side somehow, right? It's like
Norma Jean and Marilyn.
Yeah, exactly. So, but interesting. Yeah, that's She's so I started blasting. That's Andrea George.
Right. So I went in there and right. I came in. Yeah, totally. Yeah. She had won in the chamber from jump.
Yeah,
it's an interesting counterpoint. I don't think that you can avoid talking about Marilyn as this iconic, symbolic figure, like a demigod of the American psyche. She holds that much kind of psychic water for people. Yeah.
But I did do a little bit of looking at this, Marilyn Monroe pregnancies, and it looks like it's kind of controversial, and maybe somebody knows the full story out there, but it sounds like she had some small number of miscarriages and possibly, one or more abortions. This idea that she had 20 plus, that impugns, I mean, to me, that kind of impugns her, right? It impugns Marilyn Monroe, and it's a lie about
It
her.
would be deeply, whatever you feel about abortion, 20 plus abortions is deeply irresponsible.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so for
Right.
Dworkin to say that about her, to me, that feels, how is that better than having
Right.
her sing Happy Birthday? I don't.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it just feels like an intro that like an editor maybe needed to have a sit down with Andrea and go, what are we doing here? Yeah.
Right. Anyway.
Seth, do you any more fun anecdotes before we break and then come back on the
Um,
After Dark to talk about JFK and Marilyn's love life writ large?
I remember going through pictures at the actor's studio when Marty died and seeing a picture of JFK at the actor's studio. And I was
Oh.
there were all these pictures gathered on that stage with the brick wall. And let's see, Vivica died at 95. So I was there in Marty's house, and it must have been 95. And I go, what was JFK doing there? Was this like a rally or something? It doesn't look political. And he looked at me and he was like, why do you think JFK was there at the actor's studio set? And he just gave me a look like, oh, okay, I'll shut up now, Marty. Because he was right. Like there weren't any other security guys around him. There weren't any other political people there. It was just like JFK happened to be at the actor's studio that day.
Very spicy.
The other story I'll tell is that John Strasberg, and it's in his book, there was a period where John Strasberg's father had Marilyn staying over at the house, and it's in the book. It must have been pretty strange at the house because his book starts off with him coming home. He's a teenage kid, like 15 years old. He comes home and there are these two guys and they're naked and they're in handcuffs and there are police standing over them. And John's father is there and he's talking to the cops. And John looks and he goes, I guess they're doing a scene with my dad. And he just goes upstairs to his room, and then he comes back down for dinner, and he goes, "What scene was that about?" And he goes, "That wasn't a scene. Those two boys thought that I ruined their acting career, and they tried to come and get me, and I called the police."
Oh,
and so that's the beginning of the book. So then it comes to the point where Marilyn moves in, and she has a psychiatrist downstairs. She does a session with Lee privately. Then she goes downstairs to the psychiatrist. Then she has dinner with the Strasbergs. And then she kicks John off of his couch. So he has a place to sleep. He sleeps on his couch. And she sleeps in his bedroom in the back. And,
I didn't realize that she moved in with the Strasbergs.
Moved in with the Strasbergs.
Oh, I did not know that.
And
yeah.
So one time in the book, if you get the book, it's very. I've knocked it around a couple of times in my head. He and I are close. You interpret it as you will. He comes to this point where one day he said there was a night and she came out and she was in a see-through robe, and she said, "Johnny, don't wake your parents." And he had orders to do that if this happened. And she smelled like drugs. And she said, "Johnny, just hold me." And she's holding him, and she's in her 30s and he's 15. And he's thinking, every man in the Western world wants what I'm getting right now. And I'm not enjoying it at all. Like it's all about what's wrong with me right now. It has nothing to do with I could be enjoying this moment. I should do something. And they just held each other in the dark, and that's what it is. But years later, I was talking to my friend G, and I was like, he sat down and he wrote this. A lot of time has gone by since he wrote this. Maybe he just wants people to think that of all the people out there in the universe, he's got to be Clark Kent about this. Like maybe something that I don't know. Like when I first read it the first few times, I related to it. I was like, yeah, I've been in that position. But I've also been in positions where so I don't know. I don't know.
Interesting.
But I mean, that definitely.
Yeah. Well, how old would he have been? I'm sorry, you said how old?
He was 15.
15. I mean,
15.
That's a lot. Like you imagine, your first sexual experience is some awkward fumbling thing with some other girl your age.
Like,
yeah,
got loud.
It's like learning how to drive a stick shift in a Lamborghini.
Right.
It's
garage.
Right. It's too much. I have to say, Seth, Michael May, thank you so much for coming on. We're going to come back for the after. That's a showstopper right there. Johnny, hold me. I've really enjoyed this. We love talking about our subjects, and we're going to come back on the Patreon for After Dark and talk a little more about how did Marilyn Monroe and JFK meet. And I've got another article about her various big love affairs. And I have a funny feeling that if we keep Seth going for another 20 minutes, we'll probably hear some other interesting stories. Do check out Obscuria Filmcast on YouTube. You can find the episode I did with them on A Dark Song there. And Seth, I want to come on sometime and do some other movies with you guys. Yeah.
Absolutely.
We love movies on Art of Darkness. We sure do. All right. Well, let me think about what those crab legs sound really good.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go. I don't know.
I have a couple crab legs.
I might order some seafood after this. Oh, wait, delightful. I can't leave my house because I'm in the middle of this ritual that will go unnamed. But when it's done, my entire house is surrounded by salt, so I'll have salt.
When you're doing an Abermelon ritual, can you order from Uber Eats and just wait into the
can you reach across the salt? Can somebody pass the salt, something over the salt to you? What are the rules here? Yeah.
I ordered extra demons.